Hi, my name's Kristen McCaughey. I'm one of the sports dietitians with SacFit. Charlotte is another one of the dietitians with SacFit, and both of us are available if you ever need one-on-one consultations. But today we're going to go over a look at supplements. So go over a lot of different supplements, kind of a broader scope of supplements, and then back into specific ones as we go. So a little bit about why we might use supplements and the reasons behind them. Sometimes just to meet nutritional needs, right? So if we have a little bit of a lower intake sometimes and we need to supplement to get all of our micronutrient needs met, so vitamins and minerals, sometimes just to help us meet our needs. Improving nutrient deficiencies, so if we're diagnosed with a specific deficiency, we can really help with supplementation with that. Sometimes enhancing athletic performance is another reason why we use them, or achieving personal fitness goals. All that to be said, we have to make sure that we are having a food first approach, making sure that we have a well-designed nutrition program in place, because if we don't have that in place, then supplements sometimes don't really help. But as long as that's in place, then supplements can really assist us there. So, like I mentioned, just making sure we have the foundation of our nutrition plan met. So making sure we're meeting our overall calorie needs is kind of our first and foremost need there. Once we do that, then we can focus on a little bit more specifics of nutrient timing, different things like that. But the top of that pyramid is going to be supplements. So once all of those things are done, then supplements can really be kind of that cherry on top that help us with those different aspects that I already mentioned. So making sure we have a food first mentality. Food is a very safe way to get our vitamins and minerals. The FDA regulates our food supply. So very easy way, safe way, cost effective, right? Food is usually a little bit more affordable than supplements. So just making sure that we are using that approach first before we consider supplementing. Again, just making sure that we have all of our needs met before we consider supplementation. So when we look at evaluating a supplement, we want to make sure that we are seeing if it's right for us, right? So we want to make sure we're asking ourselves specific questions. Does the supplement claim make sense to us? Is there any scientific evidence available to actually support what the claim is making for that supplement? And then is it legal or safe? So we want to make sure, obviously, we're supplementing in a safe way. We don't want to put harmful ingredients into our bodies. So making sure that we're asking all of those different questions. And a good way to make sure that our supplements are safe and that they're quality supplements is by looking for like verifying agencies. So there's 3 different ones I'll go over, but basically these agencies are going to go in and look at supplements because the FDA does not regulate supplements. So the FDA really looks at obviously all of our food and make sure that's safe for consumption. But when it comes to supplements, the FDA doesn't really get involved. So there's really no regulation over supplements in any way unless there's a verifying agency that's hired to come in and look at the supplement company. So that's why it's really important to have one of these companies come in and look at a supplement. So the first one is NSF, Certified for Sport. NSF is a company that basically, it's a third-party company. They come in, test the product. Basically, they're looking for harmful levels of any contaminants in the supplements. They're making sure that what's on the label is actually in the supplement in the amount that it says on the label. And then it's also looking for banned substances. And banned substances obviously are specific to sport typically, but also they're typically banned for a reason. Typically they're banned because they've found some sort of harmful effects from those banned substances, which is why they end up being banned. So NSF will actually look for those banned substances and make sure that those aren't getting into the supplement. So they're looking at all of that. They're looking at the manufacturing practices, making sure that all of those are safe, that there's no risk for cross-contamination, anything like that. So NSF Certified for Sport is one that's a really good thing to go with when you're looking at supplements. That label, the like blue and orange, will be on the actual supplement. So it's usually printed on the bottle somewhere. And they also have a website. So you can also go on a website, search different products, different brands. If you're looking for a specific supplement, you can see what brands have that supplement that are NSF Certified for Sport. So really good tool to make sure you're getting like a quality supplement. Then we also have Informed Sport and Informed Choice. Very, very minor difference between the two. The main thing is the Informed Sport looks for those banned substances, and they have a little bit more of a strict regulating policy versus the informed choice will still look at what's on the labels in the product. They're still looking at manufacturing practices, but they're not diving as deep into those banned substances. But both, if you're not too worried about competing in a sport and being tested for banned substances, informed choice is still a great way to ensure that you're getting a quality product. Typically, quality products aren't really going to have those banned substances anyways, so both of those are a good safe bet as well when coming to supplements. Again, both of those, the little sticker that you see at the top, that will be printed on the supplement label, and that's how you kind of know. You can also look that up online as well. And then the last one, USP verified. So USP verified is not really looking at those banned substances for sports, but it is looking, again, at what's on the labels in the actual product, and they're looking at manufacturing practices and things like that. And manufacturing practices are important just, again, for cross-contamination purposes, making sure that there's nothing sneaking into the supplement. So they're also looking at the expiration dates, making sure that what's in the supplement will stay in that amount all the way up until that expiration date, and that it will break down in the body in a certain amount of time. So all three are great ways to get a quality product. So when we talk about kind of more foundational type of supplements, so things that aren't very specific, for example, to sport or athletic performance, but more of this foundational coverage, multivitamins are a great one to start with. We like to kind of refer to them as more of like an insurance policy, right? You're getting a little bit of all of the different vitamins and minerals in the body. So you're not going to get super high doses of anything, which is good because we can reach too high of levels in some of the vitamins and minerals. So we're not getting mega doses of anything, but we're just getting a little bit of all of the vitamins and minerals to make sure that we're just getting enough of everything. So again, like kind of like an insurance policy, just to make sure we're meeting our baseline needs for those vitamins and minerals. Just in case we're missing anything, maybe we eat a diet that's not super varied, maybe we eat the same thing very often, so you might be missing out on like one or two things. This is a good way to make sure that you're getting everything met. This also is helpful in times of like higher stress, maybe anytime that you have like impaired digestion. So if you were on a course of antibiotics or something like that where it's going to kind of affect your digestive process, this can be a good way to just make sure that you're, again, getting all of those nutrients that you need. They will have both water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins in the multivitamin. And the difference there is the water-soluble vitamins in excess will just get flushed out because they're water-soluble, right? Versus the fat-soluble vitamins, which are A, D, E, and K, those 4 vitamins do get stored in our fat cells in the body. So those do accumulate over time. So those are the 4 that we do want to be mindful. If you're already supplementing with a specific, say, vitamin D at a very high dose, you just want to be careful that you're not accidentally double dosing that, right, with a multivitamin and a specific supplement. But typically, the fat-soluble vitamins in a multivitamin aren't going to be in too high of levels, so we can just get a little bit there. The other somewhat foundational supplement is going to be omega-3s. So oftentimes in the form of fish oil, they do have algae oil. If you're somebody who avoids doing any fish, they both will have a similar taste to them. But omega-3s are very anti-inflammatory to the body, so they decrease overall inflammation. They're very supportive to our overall like brain health because our brain is comprised of a lot of those omega-3 fatty acids. So supplementing with omega-3s can be a little bit of this like neuroprotective kind of thing. It can help with reducing soreness. So that like DOMS symptom that we get from lifting weights, sometimes it can help to reduce that just a little bit. Again, mostly attributed to that anti-inflammatory effect that you get. There haven't been super specific studies on exact dosage here, but somewhere between like 2 to 4 grams a day is kind of our typical dose there. And many of us just don't get enough omega-3s in our diet overall. So if you're somebody that doesn't eat fish, avocado, walnuts, any type of like fatty nuts or seeds, if you're not somebody that eats those pretty much daily, then omega-3s could be a good supplement to make sure that you're getting enough of those anti-inflammatory types of fat there. Next one is going to be probiotics. So another somewhat foundational one, kind of depends on what your goal is, but about 70% of our immune system is located in our gut. So a huge part of our immune system comes from having a healthy gut. And probiotics can help with that just because we have a lot of good bacteria already in our gut. We just want to make sure that the population of good bacteria outweighs the population of bad bacteria in our gut. So sometimes, again, if we had maybe a course of antibiotics, that can kill off some of that good bacteria and throw off that ratio a little bit. So it could be a good time to supplement with probiotics. So we want to make sure that we're replenishing that good bacteria. If you don't struggle with any of those symptoms, could be fine to leave that out, but sometimes probiotics can help with any symptoms of constipation, IBS type symptoms, or IBD type symptoms. So could be something worth a try. With probiotics, typically we want to make sure that our supplement has a couple different strains of probiotics in them. So if you turn the label around to the back and see how many different types of strains are on it, ideally, if we can find one with 5 or more different strains, that's kind of ideal, just again to promote that variety and diversity of good bacteria in the gut. And then we also do want to make sure that it contains several billion CFUs, which will be on typically on the front of the label, telling you how many billions of CFUs are in there, which is basically just the quantity of probiotics available. Probiotics can also, again, help with our immune function just because our immune system, a lot of it is located kind of stemming from our gut. And then, again, helping with absorption, digestion, things like that. And we do want to make sure that we have a good amount of prebiotics in our diet to help feed this bacteria. So prebiotics typically come from foods that are higher in fiber that will help to feed the probiotics. So probiotics can be super helpful, again, if you're experiencing any of those symptoms, or if you just went on a course of antibiotics or a longer course of antibiotics and just want to make sure you're replenishing that bacteria, it's a good time to do that. So kind of diving into a little bit more sport-specific or fitness-specific supplements. The 3 we just covered are a little bit more of our foundational kind of overall health supplements. Sport-specific, the things we want to consider with really any supplement is benefits versus risk, right? We always want to make sure that the benefits are outweighing the risks of the supplement. We never want to take anything where the risks outweigh the benefits. There's just no point. We want to make sure it's safe, right? And then the cost of it. Can we get what we need from food, or is it worth the cost to actually purchase that supplement? That's another thing to consider. The longevity of the use of the supplement is going to be important as well. How long do we need to take it, or can we take it for? And is there a loading dose phase? So is that necessary for it to be effective, or can we just dive into just a regular dose? Do we need to have this like loading phase? So making sure that we know what we're using and why, and what kind of the research supports in terms of protocols of dosage and all of that is really important when we're considering supplements. So sports specific, first one is caffeine. A lot of people don't really think of this as a supplement, right? But a lot of people will drink coffee for those effects. There are supplements that have caffeine in them as well. Caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant. So it basically stimulates our nervous system. And so we can experience some benefits from that because basically caffeine will basically tell our brain that we're not tired. So it helps to kind of stimulate us in that way. So benefits, sometimes we get a little bit of like this decreased pain or perception of fatigue, which allows us to train for a little bit longer, right? Maybe a little bit higher intensity for a little bit longer. So that's one potential benefit. Decreased perceived exertion. So during like submaximal activity, again, when we're like resistance training, when we're at kind of that like submax threshold, caffeine can help to kind of push beyond that, which can help our overall training load and training volume. So that's super helpful in terms of caffeine with improving performance. Sometimes improved endurance performance, right? So endurance, higher intensity activities for a little bit longer. So really helps with some of that. Sometimes it helps with our improved concentration, right, and focus. A lot of people use it just in general before work or something like that. The increased focus can also help with our physical performance, right? So making sure that we're really like focusing on what we're doing to get the most out of the exercise that we're performing. That can be super helpful as well. In terms of dosage, consuming about 2 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight is kind of what's been recommended. That's more for cardiovascular training, like endurance type of training, versus high intensity, we want to take it closer to like 20 minutes before. So the timing is a little bit different depending on the type of training that you're doing, but the dosage will stay the same. So 2 to 6 milligrams, again, per kilogram of body weight. Typically for that, you want to convert pounds divided by 2.2 is going to give you your kilograms. You can also just do that online. It'll convert it for you. But we do want to make sure that we're timing that if we're looking for that specific performance benefit and take it at the correct time frame. The performance benefits may last up to like 4 hours. It really depends if you're a fast metabolizer or slow metabolizer of caffeine, how long it affects you for. Some people simply just don't respond to caffeine, so you probably kind of know that about yourself already a little bit, whether you can drink coffee later in the day or not, in the morning, if it gives you any type of effect. So just kind of know your own body with that. And then again, just be mindful of the risks associated with it. Sometimes headache or fatigue can come from if you're chronically intaking caffeine daily, right? And then you miss caffeine. Sometimes we'll get a little bit of a headache from that, fatigue from that. Sometimes if we're drinking too much caffeine or taking too much caffeine, or we're taking that at too late of a time during the day, it can affect sleep, which that can lead to fatigue the next day. So we want to make sure that we are taking it in a way that's going to hopefully benefit us and mitigate some of these negative side effects with it. There can be a little bit of increased blood pressure with it. So if you're somebody that already struggles with high blood pressure, maybe not the best thing for you. Again, kind of consider what's correct for you and what works for you, because it's not going to be a one size fits all with this. But we want to just make sure we're considering the risks when we're taking something as well. Pre-workouts, this is a little bit of a less defined supplement. Pre-workout can be any number of things. Typically they're blends of different things, and they're typically powdered, mixed with water, and they're typically going to, they're boasting that they're going to help improve athletic performance, maybe improve energy if you're taking them before a workout. And the goal behind them obviously is to improve energy and then to help with a performance. A lot of times, again, like I said, they're blends, so it's a little bit hard to get specific with the dosage or what exactly is in it, because if it's already blended together, you can't really control, removing one thing or adding one thing. Typically in these, what we want to look out for is caffeine, again, in that specific dose can be helpful. Creatine's another one. We'll talk about that specifically. Beta-alanine, BCAAs, those things we'll all talk about specifically. But a lot of those are in pre-workouts. We do want to try to avoid any excess caffeine. So caffeine in really high amounts, especially when it's powdered, can end up being a little bit harmful for us. Sometimes leads to an increased heart rate, a little bit of an anxiety feeling. Any stimulants, banned substances, thermogenics, which are fat burners, sometimes those can cause some other issues or have other things associated with them that for long-term use aren't the best for us. Unknown herbal supplements, so sometimes they're mixed with herbs that aren't super well researched in terms of their effects. We want to just avoid doing anything that doesn't have a lot of supportive research, just because we don't really know what happens with it. And then any excess sugars. So we'll talk a little bit about carbohydrates during exercise, but in excess with sugar, unless we're an endurance athlete that's using that as a tool throughout our exercise, excess sugar probably isn't going to be super necessary pre-workout. So we do want to make sure that we are looking out for those things. Potential side effects depending on what is in your product, right? Sometimes this overstimulation, right? Like I said, the increased heart rate, where we have this anxious feeling, sometimes it's just from too much caffeine, or sometimes those fat burners will have that effect. And then because of that, potentially trouble sleeping if you're taking too much caffeine, and then high blood pressure. So like I said, if you're somebody that has high blood pressure, this one might be one you want to be a little bit more mindful of. I typically with pre-workouts, I like to recommend just specific supplements versus a blend like this, just because it's a little bit easier to control. So again, choose what's right for you and what's easiest to actually do, but that's a consideration. So beta alanine is one thing that you may see in pre-workout blends. It is a pretty well-researched pre-workout supplement, and it's actually an amino acid. So an amino acid is just one of the building blocks of protein, right? So beta alanine is one of those amino acids, and it is produced in the body in a little bit. So it's not an essential amino acid, but we do have a little bit in the body. It's produced in the liver. It's also found in a lot of our like animal products. So fish, poultry, meat, you can get some of this beta alanine. However, it's been shown to improve exercise performance in specific amounts at specific time frames. So typically, it's most known to improve performance for high intensity exercise lasting from like 1 to 4 minutes. It doesn't mean that you only have to be exercising for 1 to 4 minutes to get the benefit. It just means that the type of exercise you're doing, you'll receive the benefit from beta alanine in that 1 to 4 minute range. If you're doing endurance activity, it may not be quite as helpful. But again, high intensity training is going to be super helpful for short sprints and things like that. So how it works, again, in the dosage that we want it does create this like buffer response to lactic acid. So during exercise, the body breaks down glucose into lactic acid, right, which is then converted into lactate. That's kind of that soreness feeling you get, or that burning feeling you get when you're lifting weights. And you get a little bit of the burning feeling when you're on your like last couple of reps, right? It kind of starts to burn. That's that lactic acid starting to build up. That's also when we have a really large buildup of lactate is when we get that delayed muscle onset soreness. So that's when that happens a little bit. So this is going to buffer that. So it's going to let us push a little bit harder for a little bit longer to, again, kind of increase that overall training load and volume to help us kind of create adaptations a little bit quicker. So dosage wise, we want to do 4 to 6 grams a day. And it generally does take, there's a little bit of a loading phase where we need about 2 to 4 weeks to start to see these results. So you have to take 4 to 6 grams a day for 2 to 4 weeks before you start to see results. And then you want to keep taking it, right, to continue to have those results. There is one side effect with this, which is like a tingling sensation typically it's in the hands and in the face when you take it. And it's just basically kind of feels like pins and needles when your foot falls asleep and you get that like needle feeling in the bottom of your foot. It happens in the hands and the face. Usually goes away within 30 minutes. But it is something that happens when you take this supplement in that dose, right? So it goes away naturally. There's no long-term side effects associated with it, but it is something that happens just to be aware of. Creatine, another very common supplement, I think, typically in the form of creatine monohydrate. But it is, again, kind of something that's naturally occurring in the muscle. You can also get it from a lot of your animal-based food sources. And it helps to produce ATP, which is our energy source for exercise, right? Specifically for the phosphocreatine energy system, which is the energy system used in the first typically 0 to 10 seconds of exercise. So any powerful movements, explosive movements, again, kind of like jumping out into a sprint, something like that, those first 0 to 10 seconds of exercise, we're using that PCR energy system, which is supported by creatine, just because creatine is going to help generate that phosphocreatine that we turn into ATP to help us with that explosive type of movement. So creatine can then kind of help to support that type of exercise, so we can perform, again, a few more reps, a little bit more weight to kind of increase our overall training load. That can also help to support with muscle mass gain, again, kind of as a indirect effect to increasing your overall training load. So there is a little bit of, same with this, a loading phase or a loading dose. It's not 100% necessary to do a loading phase, but typical protocol is for the first 5 to 7 days of taking the creatine supplement, you will take basically the same dose as a maintenance dose, but 4 times a day. And so basically you'll calculate that out by 0.3 grams per kilogram, again, kilogram of body weight. And again, take that 4 times a day for 5 to 7 days. Then you basically drop it down to a maintenance dose, which is just that once a day. Typically the maintenance dose is about gonna be 3 to 5 grams. So if that's just easier, a lot of times I'll just tell people you can take that 4 times a day for the first 7 days and then drop it back to just once a day that you're taking that. So this one, the only side effect with this that the research actually supports is creatine does get stored in the muscle with water. So you will experience a little bit of like this water weight gain initially. It's typically about like 1 to 3 pounds of water weight. It's nothing crazy. And it won't continue to build just because once our creatine stores are saturated in the body, we can't retain any more. So once you saturate those creatine stores, then any excess will just get excreted through the kidneys kind of. So any extra, it's not like you're going to continue to just gain weight overall. It's typically like an initial 1 to 3 pounds of water weight that when you start taking it. Protein, another pretty common one. There's various types of it, right? So there's whey, casein, there's plant-based, and plant-based can be many things, but it's usually through like rice or pea protein. Typical dose of these is 20 to 40 grams post-workout. It's typically used as a post-workout supplement. I would say 20 grams is like minimum effective dose, and then it kind of depends on your body weight at what point you kind of like cap that, but typically 40 grams is about the max that you can absorb at one time effectively. And the goals behind this is just basically we're trying to decrease muscle breakdown. We're trying to promote muscle protein synthesis, right? So building muscle or resynthesizing muscles. Again, if we're breaking down muscles during exercise, we want to make sure we're building them back up. This will help to restore our glycogen stores as well, like our energy stores in our body, if we're pairing it with carbohydrates, which is super helpful. And then enhanced recovery just through minimizing soreness, because we're helping to give our body the building blocks to repair and resynthesize the muscle. So it could help with reducing soreness there. Typically, whey is going to be our go-to for post-workout because it's rapidly absorbed and it has a good amount of leucine content there, which is our main amino acid that helps stimulate the muscle building process. Casein, slower absorbed by the body, so it's a little bit better to take if you're trying to gain weight or put on muscle maybe at night or using it during the day as like a snack. Just because it's slower absorbed, it's not going to be the best for that post-workout window, but it is another tool that we can use. And then plant-based is one that if that's your preference, that's totally fine. If you don't have a strong preference one way or the other, I would probably still go with whey just because it's going to have that higher leucine content. But plant-based is totally fine as well if that's your preference. It will have leucine in there, sometimes in a little bit of a lower amount, but it'll be enough to stimulate that muscle building process. So either one is totally fine. Branched chain amino acids, so BCAAs are typically a powdered supplement that we see. And the BCAAs, the branched chain amino acids, there's 3 of them, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those 3 are the only 3 amino acids used for energy during a workout. So sometimes if we don't have enough carbohydrates in storage form to help us with the exercise, or if maybe we didn't eat beforehand, our body will obviously dive into our fat stores as well, but it will break down a little bit of muscle to provide us with some energy. It's typically only up to like 12% of our energy used during exercise, but it will come just from these 3 amino acids. So sometimes we can use a BCAA supplement to help replace those. So some of the benefits that can potentially happen from taking BCAAs, we can see potentially increased muscle growth. Again, if you're just doing BCAAs, you're not lifting any heavier, you're not meeting your protein needs maybe, it won't have that effect on its own, but as we're meeting all of our baseline needs, it could increase muscle growth, it could help with soreness and fatigue, prevent that muscle breakdown from happening. If you're maybe looking to shed weight while trying to maintain muscle mass, sometimes this can be a helpful tool just because there's less calories than a protein supplement, but it still gives you at least those branched chain amino acids. Typically taking it during or after a workout is going to be the best time frame to do so for those benefits. Leucine specifically, I don't typically see leucine isolated as a supplement, but you will see HMB sometimes, which HMB is basically just the metabolite of leucine. And leucine, again, is that amino acid that helps to stimulate the muscle building process. So sometimes when we take HMB, the thought behind it is to reduce that muscle protein breakdown, and then potentially reduce some of that that soreness, mitigate any effects of not having enough of that leucine to help with that muscle building process, right? So we can try to take that to help with, again, muscle building recovery purposes. Doses typically with this, 3 grams a day is typically what's going to be well tolerated, and there's like not much side effects associated with that dosage. Typically, we find enough leucine in our food or in a different supplement. So isolating the HMB or leucine, sometimes, again, it's kind of what's right for you. If we would rather take a BCA supplement or a specific HMB supplement, either one's totally fine. Again, kind of what's best for you and what's more supported for your specific goals. But we do want to make sure, again, we're considering which one we might be lacking more, right? L-glutamine, it's another amino acid. This one is more so involved in definitely regulating muscle protein synthesis and breakdown like the other ones. But this one also can help with gut health, recovery, muscle recovery, and it does significantly affect BCA metabolism and water transport. So we can use this basically to help to activate that mTOR process. So again, that muscle building process, which can help with, again, increasing that muscle size, building muscle, repairing muscle. So we want to make sure that we can get enough of this to do that, right? Again, we're going to get this, if we have enough protein intake, you'll get glutamine through your protein intake, but we can use it as a supplement as well. There has been shown to be like increased exercise performance, enhanced fluid and electrolyte uptake. So if you're someone who struggles with that, maybe like a little bit of cramping or anything like that during exercise, this potentially could help with that. In terms of doses, somewhere between 2 to 6 grams a day. I often see the supplement in like 5-gram doses typically, which is just fine. Very minimal side effects noticed, especially in research. Most of it showed up to like 6 weeks. There wasn't any negative side effects associated longer than that. There's just not many studies out there that are longer than that 6-week period of time. Taking it before or after a workout, totally fine. Was not really time specific there. Hydration in general, we want to make sure we're staying hydrated throughout a workout. Obviously, we start to see performance decrease quite significantly after we lose about 2% of our body weight in water during a workout. So we want to make sure we're hydrated, preventing like any heat injury, illness, stroke, anything like that. So typically thirst isn't going to be the best indicator of hydration. Typically when we're thirsty, we're already a little bit behind and playing catch up, right? So we want to make sure that we're staying on top of our hydration. So good way to do that, monitoring your own urine color. That's a great way to do it. Unless you're taking a multivitamin, that sometimes will turn your urine neon. So it's a little bit harder to tell, but if you're not, then urine color is a great way to do it, making sure you're going more for like that lemonade color versus like a clear or closer to like an apple juice. Obviously, we don't want to be on either extreme. And then during activity, we want to make sure we're trying to hydrate as we sweat out some fluid. But good general rule of thumb is post-workout, for every pound of water weight lost, we typically want to replenish with 24 ounces of fluid. So maybe like 2 to 3 cups as a general rule, just to be safe. So we want to make sure that we're hydrating well during workouts. Electrolytes are another consideration on top of fluid, right? So water is obviously the main thing that we want to make sure that we're drinking throughout a workout and also throughout the whole day, right? But electrolytes can be a tool that we can use during exercise when when it's hotter, maybe we're like a heavier sweater than others. If we're maybe a saltier sweater than others. So if you can see salt dried on your face at any point after a workout, or if you wear a hat when you work out and you can see salt dried on the brim, you might just be a little bit of a saltier sweater. Or if you're exercising for longer than, I would say, 60 minutes, electrolytes are a good idea to help replace, because when we sweat out both water as well as electrolytes. Mainly sodium is going to be the main one sweat out. So we do want to put that back in. Our body likes to have a balance of electrolytes in our body as well as fluids. So sometimes when we're just drinking water, the body's going to help to try to excrete the extra fluid if we don't have a balance of water and sodium in the body. Lots of different supplements out there for electrolytes, different ones. There's Drip Drop, Liquid IV, Noon, The Right Stuff, Element. There's tons of different ones out there. The main thing you want to look at is the sodium content. And then some of them will have carbs in them, and it really just depends what you're looking for in terms of your electrolyte replacement. So ideally, we want to have at least 100 to 200 milligrams of sodium in an electrolyte supplement. So if you're not particularly a salty sweater, you just need a little bit, that's a great amount. Otherwise, if you are a little bit of a saltier sweater, or if you are training for those longer periods of times, ones that have a little bit higher sodium, so maybe like 500 milligrams, that's going to be your Liquid IV, and your Noon are both going to have about 500 milligrams of sodium. Those would be great. If you are a super, super salty sweater, or doing a really, really long endurance event, Element has about 1,000 milligrams of sodium. The Right Stuff has, I think it's like almost a couple thousand. So again, just choose what's right for you. And then Liquid IV and Noon both have a little bit of carbohydrates in them. So if you need a little bit of energy as well, again, if you're training for longer than 60 minutes and you're not using chews or gels or something like that, those can be helpful to get a little bit of carbohydrates back in the body as well. Drip Drop is a little bit on the lower end of sodium, does have a little bit of extra potassium. So again, choosing which one's right for you, but those are the things to look out for. I would say sodium's kind of our biggest ticket for electrolytes. And then sports drinks. So sports drinks are going to be a little bit different than just true electrolytes. So electrolyte replacements are really just focusing on that sodium replacement is typically kind of like what we're focusing on, whereas sports drinks are going to help to replenish the electrolytes as well as the carbohydrates. And typically they're going to be in a drink form versus like a powdered form, right? So they're in a specific amount versus the powdered form of electrolytes. We can concentrate them a little bit more if we want to. Sports drinks, not so much. But sports drinks are very, very helpful, again, as a tool, kind of having everything in one beverage, right? And if we're training for longer than 60 minutes, again, we do want to start to replace both sodium and carbohydrates. So a lot of times the sodium, obviously we're sweating that out. We want to replace that back. The carbohydrates, we do want to start to replace because we will start to run out of those a little bit. We won't really truly run out completely for quite a while, but we will start to see performance drop because we won't have them quite as readily available to turn into energy. So when that happens, we want to be able to use carbohydrates to help to increase and improve our performance for longer. So again, if you're training, we can help improve those training adaptations by giving our body a little bit of carbohydrates. Or if we're actually competing, obviously we want to make sure our performance is optimal, so we can use that as well. But sports drinks typically, again, are going to have all of those things in one. The things we want to look out for on these to make them a true sports drink is that they will have sodium, at least 100 milligrams per cup. So most of the sports drinks, I would say, are like 16 to 20 ounces. So we're talking about per 8-ounce serving. So at least 100 milligrams of sodium per 8-ounce serving, and then 10 to 18 grams of carbohydrates per 8-ounce serving. Typically, if we go lower than that, we won't really see the performance benefits of utilizing those things. If we go too high, especially on the carbohydrates, if we're going above about 60 grams per hour, during exercise, sometimes we can experience some GI distress going on. So we want to make sure we're like in that specific range. Typical sources, Gatorade and Powerade, like the original, so the Gatorade like Thirst Quencher, those ones are in those specific amounts just because there's been so much research done on those. There are other ones out there, and obviously a ton of them. That's when you want to really pay attention to the label and just make sure whatever rate you're getting those things is in that amount, depending on what effect you want to have. Some of them, like I think Propel, sometimes like boast that it's a sports drink, probably not quite so much because it's not going to meet that criteria. So again, whether you're using electrolyte packet, sports drinks, just know what you're using and for what reason, right? So and pick which one's right for you. So take home message, just choose what works best for you. So what works well for somebody, a friend, family member, whoever, somebody on Instagram, may not be the best strategy for you, right? We're all a little bit different. We all have different genetic makeup. We all have different goals, right? Different things going on. So choosing what's right for you, different health history, just making sure that you're paying attention to what actually works for your own body, and doing your own research before you actually implement, right? So making sure, is there a specific dosage that you need for a specific supplement? What dosage is that? Is there a loading phase that you need to do before you have it? What are the risks versus benefits? Are there any risks? Do they outweigh the benefits or vice versa, right? We want to make sure we're always taking supplements where the benefits outweigh the risks. And then assess if it fits into your lifestyle, right? So is it necessary for you? Do you need it? Are you getting it through food already? Is it effective in the research, right? So is it necessary for you to take? Is it applicable to your specific training? So the type of training you're doing, the intensity, the duration for your training, or is it more for, like, if you're doing high intensity and it's more for endurance or vice versa, right? So, and then does it create any health implications? So if you're somebody who has history of high blood pressure, maybe caffeine's not going to be the best one for you, where it might work really well for a friend of yours or something like that. So just making sure you're really focused on what works for you specifically, and knowing, the research behind it. Is it really supported by research? Is it not? And what is it actually doing for you? How long do you need to take it? Cost-wise, are you able to do that for the amount of time that you need to get the benefits from it? So just all things to consider before you actually start taking a supplement, and figuring out what's actually right for you. If there's any questions or anybody has like supplement questions or has questions on how to evaluate a certain supplement, my email is here. If anybody has specific questions, I'm happy to help. And like I said, always available for one-on-ones, consultations, things like that. So any questions, feel free to send them my way.